Howdy partners, yes I'm back with another JT Edson review. This time we're skipping forward 35 books to book 69, The South Will Rise Again, which was released in 1972. For full discourse, I have probably read 4 of those 69 books and found them to be generally accessible, as in whatever number it says on the cover, I've had no issues following the story. However, this book starts with something of a warning that it might not be so simple. An author's note says that the events in it run concurrently with 2 other books, Hell in the Palo Duro and Go Back to Hell. While billed as a complete story in itself, it is also the sequel to Two Arms, Dixie. Confused? Don't worry about it. I was concerned that this might be a struggle, that the weight of 68 books of lore and backstory would be just too much, but Edson does a pretty good job in explaining it all, and mostly I found the information dumps to be succinct enough to be engaging. The story begins with Melanie Beauchampagne doing a stage magic show with her assistant Texas. Things are not rosy between the two girls if the bruises they're trying to hide are anything to go by, but the big showpiece trick has a sting in the tail. When Mel opens the magic box to reveal her assistant has disappeared, 2 gunmen burst out shooting the governor, Stanton Howard, and 2 of his protectors, namely Mark Counter and the man, myth and legend, Dusty Fogg. Now, killing your lead character off is quite the hook and guaranteed to get an audience to want to read on and find how this all came about. Whether this would be increased or even perhaps decreased if you'd read the other books, I can't comment, but it was certainly a lively beginning. From here, Edson jumps back 2 weeks and introduces Sabo the Magician, who is working for the Brotherhood of Southron Freedom, a paramilitary group working in the Reconstruction era South to grow resentment amongst the local citizens. Their goal is to recruit soldiers and backers in order to raise an army and free the South from the Yankee oppressors. They are aided by the local overseer having something of a heavy hand, though that is not really shown in this book, perhaps in one of the others. But Sabo will then come through a town, put on a show, and arrange a meeting with locals who've been pre-vetted as sympathetic to the cause. But first, he needs to recruit a new assistant and stumbles across Melanie Beauchampagne, who's recently released from prison and attempts to pick his pocket. Her sleight of hand, while unsuccessful, earns her a job in the stage show. She proves herself a capable assistant and enthusiastic towards the cause of Southern freedom. At one of these meetings, Edson notes, the main topic of conversation had been the evils of living under Yankee domination, and I have to say that I'd always considered these novels to be something throwaway, largely standalone adventures of a rather two-dimensional nature, but I was intrigued by the setting here. The Reconstruction era isn't one that I've read much about or even seen depicted that often. I found it fascinating to read about the period, to try and empathise with people who weren't invaded by some foreign power, which we read about far more often here in Europe for obvious reasons, but the South actually defeated and then occupied by their neighbours. That must be extremely hard to deal with, especially as depicted here with the local governor being heavy-handed and more concerned with punishing the South for its opposition to the Union than with rebuilding it. We're also shown prominent families who've lost everything in the war and then being reduced to less than reputable trades. It all provides an intriguing setting and a healthy dose of verisimilitude, a far cry from the by-the-numbers fictional gunman cleans fictional bad guys out of fictional towns that I'd assumed all these books were. When you see something like this at the bottom of the page, you can't help but feel that by diving into the series at random points, you're really missing out on something far deeper and better researched than credited. There is a slight problem for the Brotherhood, though. Melanie is in fact Belle Boyd, who was a spy for the South during the war, but is now determined to avoid another wasteful civil war and is working for the North against the Brotherhood. Seeing the scale of the operation, Belle sends a message to her superiors: send me 3 regiments of cavalry or Dusty Fogg. A great quote that conveys both the scale of the problem and the size of the hero. Unfortunately, she is observed doing this by one of Sabo's men, and they grab her, intending to reveal her to the others as a spy. Here the narrative switches to Fogg himself. He is in town, and after he is attacked by 2 Yankee thugs and saved by a couple of helpful locals, he agrees to travel with them to hear out the Brotherhood's case. Arriving at the ranch of the leader, calling himself de Richelieu, Fogg recognises him as his former commanding officer, Colonel Aspley. Unfortunately, this means that he is in turn recognised because Fogg is not Fogg, he's Mark Counter. Mark Counter has been impersonating Fogg in order that Fogg himself could go undercover while still being seen about town and doing the sorts of things that Fogg usually does. De Richelieu needs somebody to drill his volunteers into a proper army, and he's quite prepared to let Counter continue his deception. This he does willingly because he thinks if he drills them hard enough, some of them are going to desert. Not long after, Fogg and his usual gang appear in the local town undercover as stagecoach robbers, and they too are recruited to the cause. This turns out to be extremely useful because Sabo arrives at that point with Belle in custody, and Fogg, undercover himself, identifies her as his wife and a confidence trickster, saying that Belle Boyd was nothing more than an assumed identity, and this line is believed, and the two then learn about de Richelieu's plan. He intends to assassinate the governor in the way seen in the prologue, with one problem. Sabo and some of his gang have short tempers. The net result is that the magician's brains are used as wall decorations, and Mel, or Belle, has to step in and run the show. Naturally, this new career move saddles her with her own female assistant and provides Edson with the chance to indulge one of his cliches, the catfight. Virginia held herself forward. She went after Belle like a football player making a tackle. Locking her arms around the girl's slender waist, she used her superior weight to sweep Belle from her feet. They hit the floor together, hands diving into hair, screaming, squealing curses, shedding strips of their flimsy garments. They rolled over and over in an inextricable tangle of waving arms and legs. This is one of about 3 paragraphs of equal length, and because Edson switches from the scrap to the observing Waco's perspective, it would have been fine left as it is, aside from perhaps using this too modern simile here, which I found immersion breaking. The rest is tidy enough. I think if you ditch the hands diving with something like snatching, it works better, especially when you follow up with this alliterative beat here. And if you're using these plosive T's for the same effect, you could use flapping or wafting instead of waving, and body parts or appendages, or even having removed hands from here, hands and feet. On the next page, however, Edson continues the scrap, and things become a little gratuitous. This being something of a staple for the series, however, it may well please the more expectant fans. Fogg has a plan. He usually does, and it turns out that the deaths in the first chapters were staged, the gunmen being his cronies, including the famed Isabel Kidd. De Richelieu's plan to blame the murder on the Yankees in order to gain support for his movement is in ruins. Counter, though, owes him a debt, having been saved by him during the war, and allows him to go free. De Richelieu instead attempts to gun down Counter, which goes about as well as you'd expect. He was unwilling to live with a debt to his former subordinate, which seems a pretty sad reason to get your body a new orifice or two, and it leaves Belle worrying, will it ever be over? I will be honest that part of the reason I bought this book was because I'd heard accusations levelled at Edson of racism or of supporting the South, but it simply isn't the case. Edson sits comfortably on the fence, portraying both sides as having good and bad people. Belle observes the meeting of the Brotherhood's potential supporters early on, and she says, Belle had identified the guests as malcontents, trouble causers, and rabid secessionists of the kind she had always mistrusted as much as the violently pro-unionists. Fanatics of any kind had always been dangerous. And she is herself a former agent of the South, now working for the North to stop another outbreak of mutually damaging hostilities. It is, along with the setting that I talked about earlier, a well-nuanced take for such a short text. Additionally, when we see the potential leaders of the new Free South carving up positions of power for themselves, I was even reminded of George Orwell's quote about revolts only ever being successful if they kill their leaders after their victory. At the book's finale, when Edson writes, I hope the day never comes when the South has to rise again, it could be read as both the Union being successful for all parties if there is mutual respect, but also that the South is a moral break on Northern excesses. But that's as far as the support can be taken, really. In fact, far from any controversy around race, it's probably only women who would have cause to complain about the way they're depicted. This sort of description is commonplace, as it has been in all of the Edsons that I've read. Beautiful beyond any question, she had a magnificent full-bosomed, slender-waisted figure, which the flimsy robe emphasised to its best. To find controversy here, though, you'd really have to be looking for some. My biggest gripe really with the catfight was that I found it unnecessary and a bit silly, making it out of place in what was otherwise quite a serious book. By way of balancing, Belle Boyd is a fiery, entertaining character who is the main lead for a good portion of the adventure. She gives as good as she gets among Fogg and all his posse later on, and I'd be happy to read more with her. In conclusion, this book is a very solid Western. While lesser in thrills and spills than Quiet Town, which I also reviewed on this channel, it makes up for this by covering an often ignored time period, and it does so in a serious and balanced way that I found thoroughly enjoyable. While there are occasional info dumps for the uninitiated, like myself to be fair, they weren't so painful as to put me off reading on, so hooked was I by the setting. The non-linear time frame helps with the intrigue, and while Belle Boyd has the adventure to herself in the early going, this reads like a pretty decent spy thriller. She is eventually overshadowed by the trickle of alpha males into her story. I think if she'd been left to her own devices, this might even have been the better book for it. The peril inevitably dives off a cliff once Fogg and co. arrive. But you know something is going well when the arrival of the indefatigable Dusty Fogg is almost a disappointment. A solid western, and at book 69 of the series, is somewhat of a surprise to still see it going along this well.
My name is Riley and I'm a student. The first 2 weeks at Sexington University were perfectly normal. I was drunk until the end of freshers when my student loan ran out. Then Professor Lovecraft exploded his lab and my eyebrows and everything changed. My roommate started dying. Aliens invaded. I killed a dragon over breakfast, got stranded in the past and attacked by dinosaurs. I might have committed a genocide. I might have robbed an empire. I may even have saved the world. I really hope next week is quieter. I have an assignment due.
Thanks for watching. If you click like and subscribe, I'll see you in the next one.